We're back. We are back.
Hey.
So some of you may be wondering why Hugh is in the seat and it's not a review of some sort of TV show as we said it was going to be. Hugh and I have missed you and we're back now. And I think just to give a bit of context, and Hugh, you can back this up. We started doing our sports stuff over the course of the last month. And this week we both were talking about certain things that we wanted to bring to the table that weren't sport related. We've had a bit of a reassessment on what we're doing. Would you say that's an accurate representation of where we're at right now?
I would say, yeah. What was what we said before? Was it a rebirth?
It was a rebirth. Yes,
it's a rebirth. We're divas. We want to talk about it all. Our first instinct was we have voices. We want that to get out into the sphere, into the interwebs. And upon doing that, we discovered that we were kind of chasing some views on stories and talking about stuff because they were popular, when neither of us were really that kind of bought into, and actually brought a little bit of stress of looking into them. And we thought, actually, we don't want to go down that path. We want to talk about stuff that genuinely interests us. And sport was something at the time. And we thought, you know what? This is a lot more fun. It's easygoing, lighthearted. Let's just do sport. And then we started doing sport. And now we want to talk about other stuff. We want to talk about non-sport stuff too. So we're going to have our cake and eat it.
Yes. So we have, this channel will still be, and we made the decision to create Bearded Sports because there was such a divergence of subscribers. And interestingly, our sports subscribers and our Bearded Philosophy subscribers, this channel, have the same number of subs now. And those people that subscribe to us for very different reasons. So this channel will maintain, will stay as just more, I think, more current events, but it's more current events. It's more us talking about things within those stories that are interesting, not necessarily current events, but we just wanted to tackle conversations and questions that weren't necessarily linked to who's knocking whom out.
More debate and philosophy based discussions rather than, the latest kind of grilling in the media, the latest gotcha.
Yes. And for those of you who just subscribed, we had a few subscribers after we did our first reviews. And if you're watching this and you're wondering about the reviews, there will be a new channel. I'm going to put a link up here. It's Speakeasy Reviews. So Andrew and I will still be doing our reviews in the collective basement and garage of our houses. And coming up this week, we are reviewing Back to the Future, the series. So do tune in for that. But we're coming back to us, Hugh. So that is the last you'll hear of Speakeasy Reviews until the next show when I plug it.
Love it. Love the name and love the logo, Shauna.
Yeah, thank you. I worked hard on that one. And then soon enough, there's going to be this week. I have decided. I was debating on this. There is going to be a bearded golf video. Nick's going to help me film it, and I'm just going to splice it together. So there will be a golf video, which I'm going to plug as well. And then you have some interesting stuff that you're doing on the side as well. So make sure that you do bring that to the table so we can get people to shuttle down there and learn how to make themselves successful.
100%. Yeah. So what we got today, Shauna?
So we being divas decided we were going to talk about, both of us wanted to talk about Harry and Meghan, and Harry and Meghan. And the main issue, and I think this was something that I wanted to bring to the table as much as you, was the Harry and Meghan, the explosive interview with Oprah, and is it actually worth paying attention to? And I think it's fair to say you and I didn't watch the whole interview, but I wanted to have a grander talk about the royal family. Yeah. Because as an American, we're very intrigued by the royal family. It's not something we have. And with this whole Harry and Meghan thing, the dirty laundry of the royals out in public, to me, it seems like it's not a negative or a positive. It's almost like a cottage industry anymore. I mean, what are your views on the royal family?
Yeah, a very big question. Because I've got some kind of mixed views across the bag, really, Shauna. So what do I think of them? Overall, my opinion has been based on ignoring media as much as possible, bit of history at school, and primarily The Crown, the wonderful Netflix series, which has really actually helped me get more interested in the background of what it's all about and what it means to be a royal, and some of the rules and that type of stuff. And overwhelmingly, what came through from watching that series was, oh my God, I'm just so glad I'm not a royal. They have this privilege, as we now call it, with with instant money. They've got all the, they've got all this kind of choice in many ways, the world at their feet. But with that, they have fame. They have instant fame the moment that they're born. And for me, it's like, that's a curse. So really, for happiness, you want enough money not to worry about money, but you don't ever want to chase fame, because it's just, there are very few people that survive that well.
Yeah.
So I ultimately, believe it or not, might be unpopular, but I feel sorry for them, and I would hate to be a royal. And I am actually quite happy that Meghan and Harry have kind of jumped ship, and I wish them all the best. The royal family more as a whole, what do I kind of think of them? Well, they were created, almost a number of centuries ago, like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And I think what they stood for and the reasons that they were created, like back in the day, are very different to what they are now. And unfortunately, some of the rules that they have in place are very antiquated and out of date. And I think they really do need revising. From a personal standpoint, I don't have any animal. I know some people really dislike the rules, and I know some people are like vermin, like loyalists, and the rules cannot do wrong. And I'm somewhere in the middle of that, where I personally feel that it's not healthy for them as human beings, or for us, or as a society, to worship and put people on a pedestal. And I think the royal family is probably the biggest of all pedestals, maybe arguably globally, maybe. So I don't think it's healthy for anyone to be in that kind of privileged position. So yeah, I would say that probably wraps it up. I think that I was going to say a point about the kind of finances side of things, Sean, and we spoke before coming live.
About this before, yeah.
My thoughts generally are that although I know that they bring in, or I'm being made aware by Sean, that they bring in a lot of tourism to our country. Undoubtedly, I mean, I think that's quite obvious. Buckingham Palace alone and all the buildings that they do raise revenue for this country. I just don't think it's a good idea for them that there is a link between the taxpayers and them receiving money from us, because they're somewhat, therefore, then behold, we own them. We're paying from, we own this part of the world, and therefore we are entitled to know everything that happens about them. Therefore, the media are totally just to, escape any kind of freedoms they have and encroach into their life and tell us what's going on, any gossip stuff going on. So I think that for their own welfare, it would make more sense if they were self-sustained through their tourism or through whatever means they have with property, and they were self-funded. So they kind of can cut that cord of the general public feeling they have something over them. But a very deep topic, great question. One I'm excited into and to hear your thoughts on as well, mate.
Yeah, well, I actually looked up the value, or how much the taxpayers paying them, and it's surprisingly little in my view. As far as I almost feel like they should be asking for more from the government. It's 67 million, I think, in 2019 is what they received from the taxpayer. And I think when you look at, I don't disagree with you, because I think there's pieces where yes, the police are paying for their security, and you look at the wedding, which I think you and I both watched the wedding. We actually took time out of our days to watch the royals' wedding.
I enjoyed it.
I did too. It's something that, and my wife and I we're not royal followers. We're not big fans. I think my view on the royal family is I think it's living history, and the one thing that makes this country unique is you have these elements of living history. And it's not just with the royals. I mean, you have, organizations like the National Trust, which are supported by the royal family. And you have, these buildings and the Tower of London. You have all of this history in London, and not just in London, in England and in the United Kingdom, that's kept alive in sort of, memorand. I don't know. I'm trying to use multisyllabic words. It's not working out. But you have these, Britain is really good at keeping these sort of institutions alive. And I think it's important, for the identity of the country. But, there is an element that I wholeheartedly agree where this lifestyle is not healthy for people. And I think a good example of this, and I didn't mention this before, if you look at sort of like a real shitty version of the royal family. You look at the Trumps, and you look at, let's say, Don Jr., and you look at his children compared to William and Harry, and there is a bit of a gulf in how America does shitty royalty to how William and Harry are. But it's a real shitty existence to live and grow up in. So I'm happy that they're getting money, but I think there's a piece here where the British media are the ones that really sort of exacerbate this whole relationship with the royals. You know, you have these, commentators who do nothing but follow the royal family, and all they are gossip queens, really, at the end of the day, gossip kings and gossip queens that make money on just saying shit about the royals. And there was an interesting part in the interview, which we're going to be talking about, where Harry mentioned that there's, a relationship with the media and the royal family where you try to keep, you try to give them information so that they tell good stories about you. And that is such a parasitic, toxic relationship that's not going to lead, at all well. And that very much, I think, propagated this story that I'm not. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt when I heard it. I don't know what your views are on the story, just to transition into that, the interview with Oprah. It wasn't the bombshell interview that I didn't look at it as a bombshell interview, really. I think there's things in there that I kind of expected that really sucked. There's elements of that story that, we've only heard one side of the story, so I can't necessarily say, yeah, Royals bad, Harry, Meghan good. I mean, what were your takeaways from it?
Yeah, so I think this is where our reactions are probably slightly different. And I was more shocked with what I was hearing, and probably more on the side of more concerned about what I was hearing. When I think you're right in that, we're only hearing one side of the story here. Like, we haven't heard from the Royals came out with a statement. I suppose that's maybe my concern where I'm coming from, is I just don't think it'll ever get raised or anything will be done about it. Whatever is brought up, it's kind of, there's a feel of it being washed under the carpet with Royals. Some of their bombshell moments, for example, just to raise a view, because not everyone might have seen it, but you've got Meghan admitting that a senior member of the royal family stated they were concerned about the color of the skin of their baby, and they were also running through the idea that they were not going to support them from a security standpoint, this child, and potentially linking those things together. There were concerns about her welfare. She was really struggling, kind of being locked up in this place, not having her freedoms and having some real mental health concerns, and not really being shown any support from the royal HR. And I think just hearing a lot of this stuff, I couldn't help but feel like I just really hope that this stuff, I mean, it just sounds horrendous. What is going to be done about this? What is going to be the follow-up? And on Gogglebox, which is where I saw the whole interview took place, I didn't realize before that, they actually followed, I think it was the next night on news, they had a statement follow-up, which is just like a one paragraph. They're looking, a very mere response. Like, we're looking into it. We're so sorry it's been like that. We'll make sure we're here to support, blah, blah, blah. So it wasn't really, there wasn't much acceptance, apologies, or it didn't really set the world alight. But
it was a good corporate response.
It was a corporate response. Was exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And it's what made me. Do you know what? So this is it, really, Sean. From the interview, I was more concerned about what Harry was saying rather than Meghan, because Harry's coming at it from a more balanced perspective. He talked about his relationship with the Queen, his granny, and that's really strong. He talked about his relationship with his brother, who's going to be the future King of England, who, they've had some difficulties, but, he loves him and they're still close.
Tight with him, yeah.
Still tight with him. And he was just disappointed with how his dad has reacted, Prince Charles, in some of the situation. Again, not expanding on that. We don't know what that means. So he still has a vested interest in the royal family, whilst Meghan could essentially cut her life off from it, and she could kind of get on with it. She isn't impacted as much to the degree that Harry is, because the reason that anyone knows Harry and who he is, and that he got with Meghan in the first place, is because he is a royal and he becomes from that background. So hearing his approach and his disappointment with the lack of support shown to them as a family, to Meghan, his wife, and to the future child, was really disappointing, to the extent that he was prepared to leave that behind. So that it was sad to hear that, and I felt like more compelled to hear that side of it because I felt it was coming from a more balanced perspective.
Yeah.
But you correctly pulled me up on the fact that, hey, you know, there are two sides to every story, and we haven't really heard that other side yet.
That's where we had a mini, not a debate about this, but well, there's a few things. The first one I want to raise that I think, yeah, it is a bombshell, but I don't think it's a surprise. And that is, if I can paraphrase the story about, you know, somebody in the palace asking about the color of the baby, I can paraphrase that from an American standpoint and say, old white guy worried about color of grandchild. You know, that's like not a shocking story when you talk about old white people and their tendencies for racism. Am I shocked that, let's say, if you were to say to me, Prince Charles, you know, he is a closet, I wouldn't say racist, I don't want to use that term, but he's got prejudices and he would have concerns about the color of a baby, that wouldn't be shocking to me, but it would still be a bombshell, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't be like, holy shit, oh, you know, old white guy and royalty is not fully inclusive. Whoa, that wouldn't shock me necessarily.
I hear what you're saying. I think if it, you know, I'm not surprised by that, but the fact they've actually just owned it and supposedly, again, allegedly said that to her, admitted that to her, is pretty insane for me. Like, yeah, to actually to go behind your closed doors and speak your slurs or whatever it is, your biased views on something, fair enough, but to disclose racist views in front of someone who it directly impacts, I was quite surprised with. And I think that my concern from that front, I'd say concern, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I just think that the royal family have tried to do what they can to move with the times, because times are changing.
Yeah.
But if this is to be true, or even mostly true, then it's very concerning from a mental health point of view and also from a race point of view, how big those two are in the news right now.
Yeah.
That arguably the most famous family in the whole of the world, the most prestigious family in the whole of the world, at least up there in the consideration, is showing distinct lack of care in two major topics going through our society at the moment across the globe, not just in the UK. Like these are massive global issues. Who, you know, there have been charity works and stuff done to try and, you know, there's a lot of effort to try and raise the profile of this, and it just seemed, or it came across from that one-sided view that they're well out of sync with it. So yeah, we don't know how true it is, but you can just speculate on that. And if it is true, or even partially true, or mostly true, then it's concerning that we're not moving away from that, and that they're given that much space and time, considering they have those views.
And I think I look at it this way: is it possible from what we've heard that somebody said, just sort of off the cuff, let's say it's Prince Charles, well, I wonder if the baby's going to be black. That would be interesting. That would be our first black prince in this family, which is not in isolation, is just a statement. Oh, that would be interesting. Somebody heard that and passed that on through one of the handlers of Harry and Meghan. Is that a feasible scenario? Yeah, it's feasible. It's definitely feasible. Is it also feasible that somebody was worried about the skin color of their baby? Yes, that's feasible. So I think it's something that there's awareness on it. I think, I'm happy that it's been brought to the forefront to a certain degree, but I just really find it difficult only hearing the one side of the story. I can imagine there's a lot of scenarios where whisper down the lane didn't really portray the message that was sent clearly. And I don't want to point fingers and say racist through something somebody else heard in a very stressful situation. Somebody's dealing with mental health issues quite clearly.
Yeah. I think it's a really valid point. Is it possible? Of course it is. And like you said, is it possible that someone just blatantly just said to her that this is a real concern about the color of the skin of your baby? That's possible too.
Yeah.
And they're vastly different as far as our levels of concern of which one it being true, from one being, well, actually, if it was more hearsay or exaggerated or just, I wonder, like out of curiosity, a comment versus a genuine concern that it could be a certain color. Like they both could be true and both very different outcomes, to follow up with. But the truth is, I don't think anyone will ever know. And Harry, Oprah jumped straight on it, wasn't she? And
Yeah.
who said that? Like,
Yeah.
she was like straight on it, and and I was like, there's no way they're going to say it. And Harry was like, I will never ever say that.
Yeah.
So that was the response I was expecting.
I think that response makes, to me, it more compelling that there may have been some serious
That it was
concern.
bad.
Yeah,
That's
that it was
exactly what
bad.
I thought, mate. That's exactly
And
what. Yes.
I think I'm being overly. The reason I'm overly cautious in sort of taking a strong position, and part of that is I am a bit wishy-washy when it comes to taking a stand on anything, because I've been wrong so many times in my life. And when we look at situations like this, we look at any situation, especially, this is going to be a bit of a leap, but we look at, let's say, sexual harassment claims. So in America, the governor of New York is getting multiple claims of sexual harassment. Is it possible to respect the accuser, but also respect the accusee? I 100% think it's very possible to respect both. And that's sort of the path I'm taking, because we haven't really, the statements that the palace have come out with, the corporate statements, have not been, I know from working in a similar environment where I'm responsible for making statements for my company when we make mistakes. The best path when you've made a mistake, and it's obvious you've made a mistake, is to admit it, hold your hands up, and talk about how you're going to change. And I think everybody can forgive you and move on if you can accept that and take steps to make it better. But in this instance, we didn't see that. And, as much as it was a affirmation that they still support, quote, Harry and Meghan, it was also an affirmation that they're not accepting responsibility for this at the same time, which is a statement in itself. The not saying something was saying something.
Yeah, I'm just trying to Google it to see if I could get this statement, but I don't know if I'm going to get it in time. That's how I feel listening to you, is that I think in this case you're being too wishy-washy, and based on what I heard. So what I heard was more compelling and concerning stuff. But what I will say is I think that many more of us, and myself included, need to think more like Sean in general. As like a default setting, we need to come from that base, that we do need to hear the other side of the story. Just in this case, there was an opportunity for them to do that and to release a statement, and it was very corporate and very I don't know. It didn't move the needle for me. It didn't really seem like anything was. How would I feel if those accusations were true? If Meghan and Harry are 100% true, how would I feel in their position? I'd be really disappointed with their response. Also, that's it.
Yeah. So the following statement is issued by Buckingham statement. Oh, it's not showing the whole thing. Been
silent to learn about the full extent of how challenging the last few years have been.
Let me, because I have it here. Let me actually bring it up here. So the following statement is issued by Buckingham Palace on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen. The whole family is saddened to learn the full extent of how challenging the last few years have been for Harry and Meghan. The issues raised, particularly that of race, are concerning. While some recollections may vary, they are taken very seriously and will be addressed by the family privately. Harry, Meghan, and Archie will always be much loved family members. And I think the one of the things that stood out to me when we go through this process, and what stood out to me, the reason I kind of looked at this story at the end, I was kind of like, meh, was the actual issues raised. Harry was very clear that, as you mentioned, I got the impression that both were very, if anything, I thought this whole experience affirmed the quality of character the Queen has to a degree, because at no point was she, whilst it's her organization and she's responsible for it, they did kind of go out of their way to say, we have a good relationship with her, we respect her, we love this person. And even Harry with his brother, it seems like a lot of the insinuations were set at either the foot of the palace as an organization, or Prince Charles, and that's sort of an insinuation or assumption people are making. I don't know enough about that, but it seems like those characters, the main players, William and Queen Elizabeth, are in some ways not necessarily in the focus of Harry and Meghan.
Yeah, I think that was very clear. And they said, "How is your relationship with your father?" Oprah asked, and there was a long pause, followed by, "I've been disappointed." So we don't know to what extent that is, and then that becomes assumption, and we're jumping into things. So then, when this accusation comes out, I think people are putting 2 and 2 and making 8 with it, no one will know apart from those involved. And by the sounds of that statement, I don't think anyone will be finding that out.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I do understand from Harry and Meghan's point of view, which maybe this is why they took the interview outside of making certain things known. And this when I went into this, I didn't understand the motivation outside of, I know that they made something like $7 million doing this interview. Um, I don't know. I didn't know of all the issues with race, with mental health, and I know that we talked very briefly about, who Megan's point on nobody cared about her mental health issues. Even that, like from just that one side of the story, it's difficult to know the series of events that led up to that, because I can't really necessarily say that. It's such an obvious thing anymore to say I'm having these issues, I'm depressed, and somebody goes, yeah, that's not my department. There's a lot of unknown in that story, but I think when you look at the story itself, because there wasn't any issue that was raised with the palace, did they feel it was upon them to say this isn't as good as you think it is and we want to take down this institution? Or was it, we've been cut off and we need to make some money somehow? I don't understand, because are there tabloid stories out about this that salate them? Because I didn't find them to be portrayed negatively in the media anyway.
Oh, Meghan's getting getting beasted in the press. So she's had a hard time from day one, and I think that's where a lot of this was coming from, because I believe Diana had a lot of scrutiny initially, like prior to her death. A lot of the royals kind of come in for that, and I think especially those that are married in really kind of hit the press hard, because they've got kind of they've won the lottery or something, and the press is out to kind of, rather than it being all victorious, they want to try and find the negativity in it. So from Meghan's point of view, she's coming from a mixed race background, which raised flags. She's divorced, so that raised, from a mixed race divorcee is you think, well, he gives two shits about that. But watching The Crown, it made me realize again, I don't know how true that is, but it appears that there's a very big deal about who you're married to the extent that Charles supposedly didn't want to be with Diana. That was a backup. He wanted someone else, but because of the marriage, she was with someone else. That was a no-go. She wasn't ticked off the list. She didn't meet their criteria. Therefore, they weren't able to go ahead with it. So she kind of came in with this scrutiny, arguably, I'd say very unfair social scrutiny, but from a royal point of view, real concerns. And I think they've just been particularly hard on her. But by the sounds of it, I think she's probably had the treatment that a lot of people have in that situation, in the royal situation. So she, by the sounds of it, my take, wanted to tell her side of the story to kind of straighten some things out.
Yeah. And I can understand from Harry and Meghan's point of view, the whole cutting them off is a strange one.
Can I say one thing, Sean? Sorry to cut you off, but I felt like what was coming through as one of the biggest points in this, which I think is relevant, is that Meghan made Harry leave. I think that was like, there's this thing that, she's selfish, she's an actress, she's putting on a show, she's coming over, and this was her plan all along. And I think that there's like a lot of undercut in there, and that supposedly, according to both of them on Oprah, was absolutely not the case. So I think they wanted to set the record straight on that point, as well as a few other things. So sorry, that just came to mind.
No, I don't think there was anything about Harry's behavior that told me, and I said this to you the other day when we were prepping for this, I don't think there's been anything in Harry's behavior since, he's come into the spotlight as an adult, as a man, that lends me to believe he wanted to be in that lifestyle ever.
Yeah, I agree.
I think he put up with it, and I don't think it was as I think the most difficult thing about leaving was he probably felt like he was given a decision to live this shitty life that he doesn't like, or be cut off. And I think that's problematic when you have a family to take care of. Now, granted, he probably, I don't know what his net worth is with his inheritance from his mother. It's probably quite substantial. That's neither here nor there, because you can't necessarily sit on that nest egg and hope it's going to do everything you need it to do, especially if you're, he's going to have a big house with a lot of separation from people, and he's got children. And I think that, being cut off, it's like, well, you've brought me into this situation. I just, like everybody else, want freedom to not move forward with the family business. And now you're taking money away from me because I just want to do something different. And there is something strange about that decision. I don't think they're that broke that they couldn't, chuck a few mil their way for security or something at the very least. So I think that I can understand them even taking that interview out of spite. And not spite, that's not the right word, but taking that interview with a little bit more gusto because of the fact that they were cut off. You know, this is your family. I couldn't think, if my parents had the money, that sort of money, I couldn't see them doing that to me. So I can see that being very strange, and especially given he wants to still have a relationship, and I'm sure even, you know, Meghan and Harry want to have a good relationship with their immediate relatives. So it's got to be very difficult for him.
Yeah, very, very difficult. Again, I think there's a few points to kind of unpack there, because so from the money perspective, if they wanted to leave the royal society and do their own thing and just be Meghan and Harry, then in many ways you say, well, that's fair enough. You know, if you want to go ahead and do that, go ahead, but you're not going to get anything from us because this is our business. You want to leave the business, but without contributing anything, so we're not going to pay you for it. And you're like, well, that makes total sense. But what they were suggesting prior to when they were in the Royal Society was that we're not going to be funding the security side of it for your son because of there are things we're unhappy with, potentially skin color. We're not going to be offering security, which was like, what the is going on here? This isn't right. And that's what kind of made them want to then leave. So for not having the money whilst they were in there, when anyone else in any other situation, like William's got the support, their kids have got the support, everyone else is getting support. Why? I mean, that's one of the most straightforward answers that you'd want from them is, why aren't they going to be supported? There's nothing coming back from that. And that would be enough to want to leave, I think, in my point of view anyway. And if they were to leave, then fair enough, if you want to cut the cord. From a money perspective on the Oprah thing, Sean, look, from his perspective, he said, as long as I have enough money to keep my family secure, then that's all I need. And we need security permanently because who he is. And you think, okay, I would have zero concept of what that's like, and I could fully support him doing that. And if you could make $7 million from Oprah and try and that gets you covered for a few years worth of, you know, however long it is for his security, because it won't be bloody cheap, then, you know, you go for it, mate. If people want to tune in and do that, I have any issue. He can have an Oprah interview every week. I couldn't care less, really. I'm not going to tune into them all, but that's on him. So those are just some of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think you raise it well, because I think it's more complex than them just not doing work. I think that there's a duty of care to your family, you know, piece of it. And, you know, Harry could even make a case that he's got residuals coming to him from all the work he's done from the age of 1, for every picture that's been taken of him as a baby, you know, for every interview he's done. You know, to cut him off, I think even from a business perspective, you think about it from the perspective of an actor who, you know, your films, you may have fallen out with the producer, but you're still contracted to make money every time somebody shows that film. You're still part of that brand, even if you say you're cut off. And there's historical work you've done that has a knock-on effect to today. So there's definitely a business case. You know, it's a wonder he's not suing the royal family for money. And, you know, maybe he should be commended for not going down that route. Although maybe he doesn't have to with the interviews and book deals he could probably sign.
Again, I get a sense, I don't know the bloke, but I just get a sense that there's real love, and I just don't think that's in his character.
No,
I think it would have to be something very severe for him to do that. Can't speak for Meghan, but from Harry, I'm in full agreement with you, mate. Is that I don't think he really wanted to leave, felt kind of forced to because of situations that he just could not stand by and accept. But he seems probably the most transparent royal we've had. You know, that's been born into it, not someone that's kind of been married into it. He just seems, I think we see more of who he is than any other royal, including his brother. I think William is ultra professional, and I don't really know who he is at his core. He's the future king of England, and he acts so. He acts in accordance, very much like Elizabeth, just the true professional, who they need to be. But Harry, I think he's more of like the people's prince. Like we kind of, he's just like a real guy. Like he making mistakes, messing around, drinking, doing a bit of drugs, and you know, naughty stuff, and you know. So I think there's a bit more relatability to him.
And I want to just to make sure that anybody listen to this, I have no problem with Meghan, and I fully support. You know, she has valid concerns. My only not criticism. My only position is I don't know enough about both sides to necessarily champion everything she's saying, but I fully support, you know, I fully support her ability to be able to speak out. And I think if, she has some issues with mental health, as we all do. And I think it's a good thing that she's, publicly voicing it, because there's other people in similar positions, not necessarily the same as hers, but who are in positions where they feel they're stuck. And I think her speaking out's a good thing. And I fully support her path. And I think they should be supported by the royal family. I have no problem with that. So I'm not one of those people that's trashing Meghan. And I think for me, as you said, I am painfully middle of the road, almost to a fault. But it's a slippery slope, mate. It is a slippery slope.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I discussed this with you. We're going to change gears here, because the last 3 or 4 months, and I've used this argument myself, and I was walking the dog the other day, and I was thinking about the slippery slope argument. Now, when I say the slippery slope argument, forgetting about all the things you've said, do you know what I mean when I say the slippery slope argument?
My interpretation is that if you were going to change something, or like rules are in place and it goes against what's currently in place, and I use this as an argument, you've got to be really careful, because if we open that door, it's like Pandora's box, there's no closing it. And if it's like, if you give an inch to something, I'm allowed to do this. Oh no, you're allowed to, slap women across the face like that. That's okay. Well, then it becomes a hard slap. Then it becomes a punch. Then I'm allowed to beat you up. It's like so it's a slippery slope. If you open up a rule for something, that inch can turn into a mile. So, and I use that a lot.
See, I'm starting to think, and I will just again, I've used this argument before. I'm going to stop personally, because I think you can make arbitrary lines. So it's almost like saying, like, if I was dating somebody and they were to say, and I were to shake their hand and they were to say, look, if I shake your hand, that's a slippery slope. Next thing you know, I'll be having to give you a blowjob, and I don't want to make that jump from handshake to blowjob. We can definitely we can definitely cut a line. That handshake's fine, blowjob not okay. And that's a bit of a straw man. It's a bit of, to be fair, it's a bit of a straw man argument I'm making. However, I think you can make arbitrary lines on what is and is not acceptable without saying it's a slippery slope. I think you can say no to some things and yes to others. And we've heard this argument come up between you and I've used it too, when we talk about government involvement and we talk about freedom. And it's always around freedom, it's and that's the only time I hear this argument is it's a slippery slope. Guns. It's a slippery slope. You take our automatic weapons and next you're going to take our handguns. No, it's not. No, that was the one thing that made me think this slippery slope argument is doesn't really have much merit in a lot of situations, because you can take someone's automatic weapons but not take their handguns. Is that really a slippery slope?
So I think you've made a great point overall, mate, to be honest, because it really does depend on the context of what you're talking about. The blowjob in particular, that really hit home.
I knew it. I thought about that.
Struck a chord with me.
Yeah.
I think that, so a lot of the context that I come from is habit formation, because it's something that I've studied, and I love it. I'm really fascinated with it. The slippery slope is massive in habit forming, because I'm just gonna have half a cookie. That is it's habit defining. So could you actually have half a cookie and be fine? Of course you could. There are people that are strong enough to do that. The vast majority of the public aren't. And that when you break a rule for yourself in that format, it will normally lead to something else and going down that path.
Yeah.
But it's exactly the same point as you bring it up. And there's a lot of crossover with, we should not legalize marijuana because it's a gateway drug. And if you smoke marijuana, you'll be injecting heroin in your arm next week.
Yeah.
And
it's a slippery slope, mate.
This is the thing. This is where you come up, because there is, I think it's much more nuanced than that. The slippery slope argument is not fundamentally good or bad. It's dependent on the context that it's in. And when you're talking about suppressing freedom of speech and suppressing freedom of actions in certain kinds, or government intervention, now I'm going to stand firm, and I'm going to be, look, you've got to be really careful with what you're saying there. Because when you start shutting people up, who are you to say what you can shut me up on? And when can you start and stop that? And if it's government intervention, who are you to say that what I can and can't do for my benefit? You don't know me. And actually, I've got several other examples which I actually feel are arguably equal, if not more important, for the health of those well-being for those people and everything else. So that's when I'm going to really give you the slippery slope, and I'm going to stand behind that statement. But you're right. Like, it is not, you can't just say slippery slope for everything. It really does depend on what you're talking about, mate. So
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with you, and I'm not on. There's certain topics I absolutely fundamentally think you need to stand by.
Yeah, I think in the two contexts, there's a usage where you're not using it to prove a point. You're using it to set up an example where there's some evidence to back it up. So I worry that if I take this away, then this will happen because this has happened in this instance.
Because of history. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas it's not, that's not the reason you're not doing it. That's just sort of the metaphor that you're laying. Whereas sometimes the slippery slope argument is used to shut down any further dialogue, a lot of times anymore. So if we get rid of handguns, or sorry, if we get rid of automatic guns, it's a slippery slope. The next thing you know, and right there, that to me is like, okay, well, no, that's not an argument. You just saying it's a slippery slope doesn't make it a quote slippery slope. That doesn't mean that's going to happen. And I think you're right to say that there's a lot of context and nuance that goes into when you use slippery slope. But I find it anymore to be a bit of a cop-out argument. Not the way you've used it, and I'm not criticizing you. I've heard it a lot, and there's times where I've heard it as a bit of a cop-out argument because that is something how we're going to end the conversation and say, I'm not doing this because it could lead to that. Well, no, it doesn't have to. You know, tell me why you think it has to lead that way. Because maybe I have an argument to say, well, no, this is how I can safeguard this and this. You can, weed is a good example of that. A lot of times weed usage or marijuana usage, I don't know why I'm calling it weed. What am I, like 12? But marijuana usage, it's not, I think if anything, there's evidence that shows that now that it doesn't necessarily lead to increased usage of heroin. And, that slippery slope is not necessarily a bad thing. So it was something I wanted to raise. It was just something in my head that I wanted to share with you and get your thought.
No, because you mentioned this for the listeners. Sean mentioned this to me, and I was like, "Oh, this would be really interesting," because I really feel strongly about the slippery slope thing and habit formation, and say freedom of speech, and that actually we shouldn't be breaking those things. However, the context in which you've used it and brought it to the table, in that people using that as an argument, maybe as laziness, as lack of intelligence, or whatever it is, or lack of wanting to go into confrontation debate. I agree with you 100%, and we need to be wary of that. We definitely need to be asking questions and pushing the boundaries. I believe there are certain things which we've got to really listen, like freedom of speech, government intervention. There are examples everywhere. There are countless examples of where that has been abused, and we need to be really careful with that. And I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but
just on that example, because if, let's say, somebody used that slippery slope argument, and I want to go back to our incitement conversation, because for some reason that was the one that really sort of made me think about it, because there was a story that came out. So we were talking about Donald Trump at the time when he was when the riots took place.
Capitol Hill,
and his Twitter account was canceled, and that was a very popular slippery slope conversation. And the reason I was reminded of that was, we were talking about incitement in public parks is illegal, and at one point you could have used the slippery slope argument, let's say in the 1700s or 1800s, whenever that law first came into pass, that you couldn't just stand there and say, everybody go kill him. That's incitement. And you could say, well, that's a slippery slope. If you stop people from, you could have said it at that point, even though we're now at a point where we think, no, that's a reasonable law. And I think I think every slippery slope argument can 100% be challenged. And I think if you, my to the viewer, if you're going to argue with me and bring slippery slope to the table, and I'm not talking to you, Hugh, but I want you to listen. If you're going to bring slippery slope to the table, I want some evidence to back it up. I don't want that to be your end of argument.
I think a really fair
I would
point.
like our subscribers to keep an eye out for that. And if you find a slippery slope example that you think is relative, put it in the comments.
Well, I think we're going to be going down a slippery slope. If I've just got to keep bringing if I've got to keep bringing evidence to the table for everything I talk about, this is, it's an icy surface at least.
Learn how to fucking sled. All right, you'll be fine.
I'm just putting that out there. But mate, I've actually got one which is left field, and we haven't written about this, and I think it's going to be a short one. I think it's going to be a 5-minute one, but I'd like you to type this in, and I'd like you to talk. I want to hear your thoughts on this, because it came up today as I was going on a walk. should horses be able to defecate on the road and just be left there, and that's it? So should horse owners clean up horse poo? I don't know how you want to word that.
So
I was just
should
walking.
horses? Yeah, I go ahead. You. Make
So
your
I was
point, 'cause
walking
this
around
thing-
today. There's a massive pile of horse shit in the middle of the road. I saw two massive piles of it, and I was like, Lou, why is it all right for horses just to have a massive lump of shit on the road where tires are going to go through? They're going to spread out everywhere. Why is it okay for that? But dog owners have got to clear it up, and you're a dog owner, so you could maybe speak some more truth to this. And if I just tried to take a piss in my garden without, my bits hanging out, if I turned my back and the police saw my back and they could see urine coming out without actually seeing a bit, I could actually get in trouble for that. And there's a lot of confluence with this, and it bothered me today. And I thought, I'm going to bloody mention this to Sean. So, what I am aware of, just to kind of finish off my point, is that dogs' feces can contain more germs and concerns for the welfare of other animals and humans and stuff. So that needs to be cleared up, and I'm of support of that. I think that's a good thing generally, because we have so many dogs as well that have freedoms to kind of walk with their owners almost anywhere. Why is it okay for horses just to be left? Like, who is cleaning that up? Is that just something like, oh, it's okay, it'll be washed away? Why can't I just have a leak in the street? What's if I'm covering up and no one can see my piece? Why can't I just leak in the street? What's it or onto a plant?
Well,
so,
I think
what are your thoughts, mate?
The visibility of your dick is going to be the first issue.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm covering that up. So my back is to everyone. My hands are in the way. You can't see the piece, but I am peeing.
Yeah.
Why is that a problem?
Playing devil's advocate, and I don't disagree with you, but playing devil's advocate, I think if we look at the law exactly, you peeing in public in a corner, even if you're facing a corner, is public indecency. Even if peeing is a dirty thing to do. Now, just putting that to the side, having you urinate in the street and your urine in the street versus a horse's shit, I think you could make an argument that it's such a funny conversation. Mate, you can make an argument.
Specific? I want to be more specific on this, because I want to exaggerate the point, because I want you to argue it.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about me peeing in the street. I don't think you should. What I think you should be able to do is pee in the countryside without any issue at all. You pee as long as you're covering up and you're not exposing yourself. If you're covered up, you should be able to pee wherever you want. So if you're using that compared to a horse dumping on a road that's even in a village or a town centre, like we live in a town, just dump it on the main road. I just think, hey, is that okay?
I don't have a problem with it. So I genuinely don't care if it's in the street. I don't, because it breaks down very quickly, and people put horse shit on their gardens all the time. As long as I don't have to walk on it, it's an issue. It's not an issue. I do get annoyed when I'm on a public footpath, or like the I don't know, the Pennine Way or something like that. I'm on the coastal path, and there was a horse on it, and they shit. Now if I step in it, I will be unhappy about that. So I think you can make a case where people are walking like a footpath, but in the street, I really don't care. It doesn't bother me at all. And I don't think it's equatable to you taking a piss. Now, the countryside is different. And I don't think is there a law about pissing in the countryside?
No, I just don't think you can. I don't think you can, full stop.
Really?
I think it's like, I'm not an expert. I don't know this thing. I don't think you definitely can't pee in the street. And I am quite sure that you can get done for I know of someone that got pulled up for peeing like in a lay-by. Like, just like into the trees. Yeah. So I know that you can't do that as well. So I'm just going to put two and two together there and state that, I can't, in a lay-by, I can't just do it, say, in the bushes around here. Not that you'd have that many policemen around here, but I don't think I'm legally allowed to do that. So I'm just going to hit the Google machine here. Is it legal? It's the lack of responsibility that gets me. It's the I know the smell. It's a very different. There's a very different smell from dog feces, from human feces to horse feces, for sure. I can smell the difference, but it's the lack of care that bugs me. It's the principle of it. It's not that, oh, there's a turd there, it's like it's going to end my world. Not at all. And actually, you're dismissing of like, oh, it's on the street, I'm not bothered, but it kind of annoys me on the pathway. Well, I would argue that there are drivers there that actually really look after their cars, and they've got a massive pile of dog shit their tire is going to go through because of where it is. It's on the space it's on the driving line of where that car. And if there's a car coming the other side, they might have to go through it. And why should they have to go through that? As someone else would be rightfully annoyed if they had to walk through that. So it's a principle thing rather than the actual specific example itself. If that.
So what if it wasn't? So what if it wasn't practical for anybody riding a horse from A to B on the road to clean the shit up? What if it just genuinely the nature of riding a horse? You can't put it anywhere. There's a lot of danger, so you can't just get off the horse at that stage because you don't have control of the horse. They're big, strong animals. Would you be then saying you would rather there being a ban on any horse riding? Because that's it's a slippery slope, mate.
It is.
It is.
I really dislike the accountability of that. It just seems what you're saying. I understand what you're saying because in effect you can't really argue it. The trying to get off a horse and there's cars coming either way and they're slowing down because of it, and then you've got like what do you do with it? You've got to try and shovel like this massive pile. They're not small to pull into what you got holding the horse where you know it isn't ideal. I know that, but so are a lot of things. Like you can, I don't think you can't say like because it's not ideal or difficult. Like we can't do that. Like it doesn't matter how non-ideal or difficult things are. Like, you know what? Working as an NHS worker with a mask on fucking isn't ideal. And it is quite annoying and it disrupts my work, what I'm doing. But guess what? You still got to do it. Like, we can't use that as an argument.
But I think you can, because you can physically put on a mask, whereas I don't know. And I've worked with horses before.
Put a bag over its ass then. There must be ways around that.
I think we need to be more informed on ass bags to really go down that route. I think that's fair. I think I understand the motive behind what you're saying, because I was frustrated as a dog owner when my dog would shit in a pasture next to a cow pat and I'd have to pick it up. But I learned, and to those of you who are watching this, it was explained to me that if you do that, the animals could die from the bacteria in dog feces. So dog feces are very dirty. I think horse feces, I reckon you could even eat a piece of horse shit and be fine. I reckon you could.
Okay. I'm going to push a slippery slope argument back at you there, mate, and say I'm going to need some evidence for that before I accept that and we move forward with it. I don't think I reckon you could eat it is not enough for me to go, okay, I'm going to go down the road and top up my breakfast for the week.
I think on the road, I'm not worried about your tires or your paint, because there's mud on the road from rain. Your garden could be like where you live. Let's say you had a slight incline, and every time it rained, mud from your flower patch went into the road, and somebody who drove over it got dirt up the side. That's the same exact thing. You could maybe be more courteous and have your garden in the back or whatever the case may be. I think if your argument was on the sidewalk or on a footpath, I'm more behind you on that. I think if horses were to stay in the street, and I think they're meant to, I'm wondering if part of the reason they're meant to stay in the street is down to making sure the shit doesn't go into, where people walk, where people are not in a car.
Don't know enough.
We need to get a horse expert.
We need to get a horsey person on, don't we, to kind of explain it? But let me just take the point that you're right. Let's say that Sean reckons you can eat it, and that is factually correct, and that it's zero. There's zero harm in it whatsoever. Let me give you that side of the story. Still, for it just to be like there's no responsibility for picking stuff up. Could Hugh find something else that isn't as harmful that we're not allowed to do? Like I don't know, some perishable paper that could be left in the street that you can just chuck on the floor, that's okay, because that will just go, it won't hurt anyone. With some rain, it will go away at some point. So just leave it. Like it's kind of like, I don't like that's okay. Like, I don't like the message that it's given that, it's just a bit difficult and just leave it, it'll go away in its own time. I think that's a bit of a weak kind of excuse for it.
Aren't cars more hazardous to the roads and to your health though than horses? Horse poo on the road?
Yes. I'd say almost said that. I reckon, Sean, they are. Yeah.
Because I would say, just to throw it back at you, the paper thing, you're comparing somebody using a conveyance with really chunky exhaust to somebody saying, fuck it, I'm going to throw this recyclable, biodegradable piece of paper in the road is a necessity thing where if I ride a horse on a road, it's going to shit. Whereas throwing a piece of paper onto the road, I would say that that's not a relative argument, because you're saying somebody just deciding to throw a piece of paper should be okay versus a horse that you can't really control where it shits.
Okay, now just to wrap this up, is this the voice of reasoning of Sean, or are you now just doing this from a devil's advocate point of view? What isn't helping me is I don't have a solution, and
so
to say they need to go back and maybe shovel it up later. I think as a responsible human, they should do that. Like once they put the horse away, go back, run the track, and pick it up if it's on the road. But ultimately, I don't have a lot more excuse. I don't expect them to jump off the horse. That's unreasonable. I just thought it would bring up an interesting discussion.
It was a very interesting discussion. I think I started out playing devil's advocate and sold myself on the idea that it really shouldn't be an issue. Because for me, I think where I'm sitting right now, the camp that I'm in, is that traveling by horse is far better for the environment, even if they shit every 2 blocks, than driving a car. Now, we can revisit this conversation after petrol cars are banned in 2030, and then I think I've got to reconsider my position. But I think, you know what I'm going to do? I work with somebody who takes care of a horse and rides one every day on the road.
This will be a little follow-up. Yeah,
So let's put a pin in this and let's get the information from my friend who I work with. I will speak to her tomorrow, and I will get her take on the shitting in the street piece, and then I will pose it to you from her perspective. So I'll learn her argument and I will make it on her behalf.
Perfect. And just finally, what are your thoughts about peeing covering up? Okay or not okay?
So whilst we were looking at it, I Googled, and there were certain things to say it's actually not illegal to pee in public. And there were some things that say they weren't in public places. I think if you're peeing in the woods, like genuinely, and this is something we need to find out. I don't think if you're in the woods away from the public, I don't think that's an illegal offense. I know in Britain, you could actually walk around naked, and if nobody's offended, it's not illegal. If somebody is offended, because there was actually, I don't know if you saw, there was a documentary on, I think it was the BBC about 8-9 years ago, about this guy who loved being naked so much. He was on a mission to walk from Land's End to John O'Groats naked.
I did not see that.
He was largely successful for most of the way, and the only time it was an issue is when it was offensive to somebody. So he had there was one point where he was walking through a town and schools were letting out. He was like, I don't know if I should put something on, but my challenge has brought me this far. I can't just put something on. And he was arrested at that point because somebody said, I'm uncomfortable with this. So it's a weird thing, the law in that regard. And I'm trying to remember how to connect that to what we were talking about. I'm having a senior moment now.
It just maybe it's something that we
pick on. So I think we need to double back on the public urination, and I think we need to do more research, but I think we need to bring this up because it'll connect to horses shitting in public, and I think that's a good note to end this part of the show on.
I couldn't agree more.
Yep. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. We really enjoyed today. We are going to be going over to the Bearded Sports channel to pick up on the next UFC fight that's coming up. There's a lot of interesting storylines, so please do join us on Bearded Sports. So I don't have that banner ready to go, but also, Hugh, you have a channel on the side, don't you?
Creating one, yes. And
okay.
once it's live, well, I've got a property one, but that's a bit more, I wouldn't say professional, but that's just to display the projects we're working on. But when I go live with my YouTube, I'll let you know.
Okay. And then for me, if you still want to come and see the reviews, we have Speakeasy Reviews. So this week it'll be Back to the Future. Next week we're going to be breaking down Superman 2, which apparently there was 2 versions of Superman 2 that came out. Andrew's going to fill us in a bit more on that. So please do. I'm going to put a link here now. So please click the link if you want to join and subscribe to Speakeasy Reviews. And I'll also put a link here. I got to remember to do this for Bearded Sports. And we are heading over to the next channel. Hugh, I'll catch you later, and I will see you after the intro.
See you guys.
Take care, everybody.